Hi all, and welcome to the second lecture of the Deep Learning course. Today we're going to be discussing modular learning in deep networks. More specifically, we're going to study what is modularity in deep learning and why is it so important. We're going to be studying the most important deep learning nonlinearities. We're going to study what is gradient-based learning and how we can use our gradients to optimize our neural networks. We're going to revisit the chain rule and some calculus so that we know how to compute gradients in complex functions like neural networks. And then we're going to finish with backpropagation, which is basically the algorithmic implementation of the chain rule. As a brief recap from the previous lecture, we saw that neural networks are a family of functions which are hierarchical representation learning functions. They are parametric and they're highly nonlinear. And also they are massively optimized with stochastic gradient descent. Mathematically, they can be described with a nested function like this, which is a bit daunting. So we can further simplify them with this notation here. However, this notation is still not as clear to the eye in the sense that we don't really easily see the connections and the interactions between the different functions that comprise our neural network. So alternatively, what we can do is we can resort to a graphical representation of the neural network, like in this example here. In this case, our input x becomes the input, which is pushed forward to our first block. The first block corresponds to our first function in our neural network definition. Then we've got the second block that receives as input the output from the first block, and so on and so forth. The last block corresponds to the last function in our neural network definition, here L equals 5, and it returns the activations 5, which are basically the predictions of our neural network. These predictions have to have the same shape as our ground truth labels, so that we can afterwards compare them with a loss function, which returns the value, so the error, basically how wrong we are in our predictions compared to the reality. So what is a module overall? It is a building block, as we just saw, where we can build cascades, with which we can build cascades. It's also transformation or a function, a mathematical function. So if this is our block, the module receives an input x here, and it returns an output y. And this x can be either our raw data, for instance, our pixels, our words, or sounds. It can also be the outputs of a previous module, as we saw in the previous slide. The module's output is actually depending on our activation function, which we have to code in as the programmers or the researchers. And the module may or may not have trainable parameters. It doesn't have to have trainable parameters. In fact, under some conventions, very few layers will have, in the end, trainable parameters. For instance, the loss function here doesn't have trainable parameters. It just receives the input, the predictions as an input, and the ground truth labels as well, and returns a value. That's it. So what are the requirements so that we have a valid neural network module? Well, first of all, the activation functions have to be first-order differentiable almost everywhere. They have to be differentiable such that we can compute the derivatives needed in the chain rule, such that then we can compute the gradients for our neural network model and perform model updates and optimize. The fact that, the keyword almost refers to the fact that we don't need to be able to compute the derivatives everywhere in the input range. If there are a few spots where we don't compute them, it's okay for as long as we can make certain conventions. For instance, the ReLU is a half-linear function. We cannot compute the derivative here. It's not continuous. Well, it is continuous, but it's not differentiable in this at this point. But this is not a big problem because we make a convention, as we will see later, and we resolve this. However, if we had lots of locations in the input range where we've got no derivatives, that can be a problem, because then there are a lot of situations where we won't be able to compute our derivatives. Another software requirement is that in general cycles are a bit trickier to treat, so we have to take special care when there are cycles in our cascades. Other than that, there are no requirements, no more requirements, and this means that we can build very complex hierarchies, as complex as we want, for as long as each module is differentiable. There are no requirements or constraints regarding the connectivity between modules, that is. A very simple model that we just saw is the feed-forward model, where each block feeds another block down the LAN, and so on and so forth. It comprises the vast majority of the models out there. It's vanilla, right? And almost all convolutional neural networks are feed-forward, one way or the other. It's as simple as it gets. So very easy to understand, to visualize, and to train most of the times. Another possible type of architecture is directed acyclic graph models. And what do we mean by acyclic? Acyclic means that there are no blocks, subsets of blocks for which there are loops, there are cycles. And what comprises a cycle? Let's say we've got 3 nodes. If all arrows are head to tail, then that's a cycle. If instead we were to have an arrow such that it meets head to head or tail to tail, then we've got no cycle. And direct acyclic graph models make a lot of sense when we have good knowledge of our problem domain. So for instance, let's say we want to mix or we want to merge, we're going to fuse different input modalities like RGBs and LiDARs in a car. A reasonable thing to do is to train a different neural network, one per modality, and then start merging it afterward, like with another top layer. Or maybe when we know that a LiDAR can help the RGB modules, so we can have even lateral connections. That's also possible. So if we know that in this specific problem domain that kind of connectivities can help, this type of branches make sense. Another case where it makes sense to have alternative connectivities is, for instance, for ResNets, where we know that we've got vanishing gradients, and then we say, we can add one more connection, extra connection, such that we maintain stronger gradients. That's also possible, but for this again we had a good understanding of what's the problem, vanishing gradients. We're going to discuss vanishing gradients. That's not important right now. We're going to discuss it later. What is important is that to understand that having these fancier, more sophisticated connectivities makes more sense when we have a good grasp of our problem and it warrants them. Another type of connectivity refers to loopy connections. So this means that the module's past output becomes the module's first future input. And in that case, we do have a cycle. We must take care of it. Specifically, we have to unfold the graph, as we'll see in a later lecture. And loopy connections are often used with memory models, recurrent models, when we want to have models that give feedback and so forth. Generally, we can view neural networks as hierarchies of modules, and what is very important at this point to understand and to keep it as future knowledge is that we need data efficient modules and hierarchies. That's really crucial. What does this mean? The fact that the neural networks are very flexible in terms of design means that with great power we've got great responsibility. We've got a trade-off between efficiency and complexity. A module and the model thereof can be very complex, but this means that it will be less efficient, quite likely, and vice versa, right? So what do we want? Do we want a more complex module but less efficient or not? often it turns out that it's more valuable, more beneficial to have more training iterations with a weaker model than the other way around. And a great example is ReLU. Although our ReLU module is very simple, it's just a half-linear function, it still returns very good numbers. It returns state-of-the-art numbers. Now, intuitively, that's not very hard to explain because even with simple modules, like the ReLU, once we cascade them appropriately, we can arrive at very complex functions. So it's the hierarchy that makes, in the end, it's the final result and makes the most sense. And to give an example, let's say we want to model like a very highly nonlinear function. Well, it's very easy to imagine that we can use piecewise linear functions to approximate this curve quite all right. Right? We don't need very complicated polynomials to approximate this curve. And these, piecewise linear functions are basically similar to a ReLU. At the end of the day, what we want is to be able to use our parameters smartly. So one of our major constraints in practice is our memory, our GPU memory. So we got 10, 12, 20, 30 gigabytes of GPU RAM. That's not going to change ever. So the real question is how we're going to use these parameters in our model in the best way possible. Of course, we also want to compute the modules in our hierarchies in the right order so that we can feed the next module. So that's something to also keep in mind. But nowadays, your PyTorch and TensorFlow does this automatically for you.